let's start with the Royal Rumble because it was one hell of a show. Started with the Women's Royal Rumble match. And I'll be honest with you. There were some people that I had hoped would show up. There were some people that I kind of expected to have show up. And ultimately, I was disappointed did not show up. Now, as I think I've established on this show, if you're somebody who likes to go out of their way and say, well, Russ, you can't get yourself worked up about things that don't happen or that the WWE doesn't promise you, you're probably right. There's a good chance that you're correct. And at the same time, I reserve the right to be frustrated when things don't pan out the way that I want them to. But what did I expect? Well, Charlotte Flair, it was a known quantity. She was going to be there. We didn't know for certain that Trish Stratus was going to show up, but she did, and it kind of fit. Did I expect as many NXT superstars as we got? I think it was pretty much in line with what I expected. Both Lash Legend and Jada Parker, they both show up, looked great, had good showings in the Royal Rumble match. It was fine. The match itself left a lot to be desired from my mind, but a big part of it was Charlotte Flair enters the match, and she doesn't enter at number 30, and so you start thinking, oh, there must be additional surprises, like actual meaningful surprises, because in fairness to talent, and we'll always try to be fair here, if you see Charlotte Flair, even though you knew she was coming back, even though they've done video vignettes, you kind of think to yourself, oh, there has to be somebody big on the way. Well, Bianca and Naomi are both in the ring for a good chunk of this match, and I kept saying, as I'm sitting there with my kids, I'm like, well, I got to think Jade Cargill's coming back, right? Because that would throw a real wrench in this whole thing. It's this cloud that's kind of looming over the women's division. Who attacked Jade Cargill? Was it Naomi, who got jealous of her relationship with Bianca Belair? Could it have been Bianca Belair, who thought that maybe her star power was being overshadowed? Like, there are a lot of things that a story has kind of like had the groundwork laid for it. And so I thought, all right, well, that would make a lot of sense for Jade Cargill. She doesn't show up. There were certainly people who thought that maybe AJ Lee was going to make a return in the Royal Rumble. CM Punk went on Pat McAfee's show, and when he was asked about whether or not AJ Lee would be in the Royal Rumble, CM Punk goes, why would AJ be in the men's Royal Rumble match? And McAfee was kind of like, I see what you did there. All right. But like, could she be there? And he kind of tiptoed around it. Now, to this point, right, no one has given the indication that AJ Lee is at any point going to come back to professional wrestling. And again, maybe it's just people kind of fantasy booking in their head having her come back. Now, in fairness, as I've established many times on this show, the Punk run with WWE and even with Ring of Honor is something that I had no frame of reference to, right? Which also means that I had no real frame of reference to AJ Lee. Would it be nice to have her come back? Sure. Would it be good to see her back in the ring? Sure. I happened to watch both seasons of Heels, and I thought she did a really nice job in that show, and I could see a scenario where maybe down the line you get a Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch versus CM Punk and AJ Lee. That would be a lot of fun. You have a lot of real-life elements to kind of lean on there. Both wives had been sort of maybe not directly named, but had certainly been referenced when Punk and Rollins went back and forth on the mic a few weeks ago, or a month and a half, I guess, at this point. The whole line about Rollins saying, my wife went home to raise a kid, not that you'd know anything about that. Woof. Like, there's a lot that you could go with there. And I don't think that Punk and Rollins are done, which we'll also get to in a little bit. So AJ Lee doesn't come back. And all right, who else is left? Like, who else is a big enough star that announcing Charlotte Flair ahead of time makes sense? Who else could it be? Now, part of me thought, like, all right, Alexa Bliss is probably coming back. The dirt sheets said Alexa Bliss isn't coming back. She's too far apart in negotiations with the WWE. She's not coming back. I liked Alexa Bliss as part of the greater Wyatt story. She doesn't necessarily move the needle for me. Seems like a wonderful person and a wonderful worker. But like that doesn't move the needle for me. She came back. She was wearing the Fiend Forever jacket that had the little R and the little S, which was also Friends Forever. It was a really nice moment. She got a huge pop, and you could tell that the people missed her, and they're happy that she's back. We'll see how long that continues for. Was this a one-time pop because people have missed her in the aftermath of Bray Wyatt's passing and the fact that the Wyatt Six are still out there and people have been kind of waiting for her? Maybe. Hard to say, but She got a huge pop. But no, like the only person that I thought, well, if you're going to announce Charlotte Flair's back, the one person who wasn't there who would have made a lot of sense at number 30 would have been a returning Becky Lynch, who has been on the periphery since the Raw to Netflix announcement. I believe that there was at one of the parties announcing it or getting closer to the Raw and Netflix debut, she was in some pictures. So you could think that, like, all right, Becky Lynch coming back could make a lot of sense. Didn't happen. So what ultimately does happen? Charlotte Flair wins the Royal Rumble. And the internet doused itself in gasoline and lit itself on fire the way that you kind of would expect it to. You have to remember, once again, my frame of reference to some extent on Charlotte Flair is also a little bit foggy because, like, the four horsewomen thing, like from NXT and then coming back, like, there's not a lot there. Not a lot of my emotional baggage had been put into that. No. Charlotte Flair coming back makes a lot of sense. As somebody who could be a top of the card talent, could make the argument that the women's division has done just fine in her absence. There are people who think that she should have just, I guess, stayed away and never come back, like Scar talking to Simba in The Lion King. Run far away, Charlotte, and never return. Like, that's not going to happen. It's ridiculous. So she's back. Now she's going to main event at WrestleMania. It still remains to be seen who she's going to challenge. Will she go after Rhea Ripley for the rubber match, for the third matchup between those two, I believe at a WrestleMania, right? Or will she go after Tiffany Stratton? Remains to be seen. I don't view a talent like Charlotte Flair coming back as a bad thing. There are some people who were upset that, maybe it was a little bit predictable that she would come back and win the Royal Rumble and kind of reassert herself and reestablish her dominance in that division. That kind of was what it was. Didn't bother me. Didn't upset me. I felt pretty much like meh about it, and it's fine. I think it's better to have her back with the company than not, I guess is where I ultimately land. Will we ever see Charlotte Flair walk into a TNA ring and tussle with Tessa Blanchard? Ooh, that'd be interesting. I might be open to that. They certainly won't do that right now. They're not going to have a main event of WrestleMania or have a WrestleMania match of Tessa Blanchard versus Charlotte Flair for the TNA Knockouts Championship, but down the line, that could be a lot of fun. Now, I'm going to skip the second match because, quite frankly, it didn't belong on the Royal Rumble card. And call me an absolute hater if you will. I don't care. Motor City Machine Guns versus DIY belonged on a pre-show. It is not a match that I find in any way, shape, or form exciting, enticing, a reason to sit in front of the TV or have the PLE pulled up on my phone. Like, no. I even tweeted about it in the moment, and I asked, is there anybody on this earth who honestly cares about this 2 out of 3 falls match? And the resounding response was, no, absolutely not. And I even said it's kind of like an extended pee break episode or a pee break match. In that, like, if you're in that arena, if you're at Lucas Oil Stadium, which I happen to enjoy, I have a little soft spot back in the Westchester Marching Band days. We performed at that stadium. It's a great place. Has a little piece of my heart. I love that place. It's a great stadium. If you're ever in Indianapolis and you have the opportunity to go there, it's a great place to go. But if you're one of the 65,000+ people in that stadium, that's the match where I get up, I go take a pee, I go check out the merch stand, I maybe grab some food, I maybe have a beer or a couple of other drinks, maybe go back to the bathroom again. And by the time that 2 out of 3 falls match is over, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling satiated. I've got my merch. I've used the bathroom twice. I had some good food and drink. That match to me was nothing. It was a big old nothing burger. And I tried to explain to my sons. They were like, why, what does 2 out of 3 falls mean? Remember, very slowly but surely introducing my kids to wrestling now. And I'm like, it's like, what's going to happen is one of the teams is going to get a quick fall. The other team is going to eventually get their way back to another one. It's going to be tied. And then you're going to get like the actual finish of the match that would have otherwise happened in a regular heads-up tag team match. Now, what ends up happening afterwards is kind of interesting. The Street Profits show up. They're donning all black. Angelo Dawkins has a crutch, smashes it over the backs. Like, that's an interesting turn of events, I guess. But the match itself was just like lackluster. The afterbirth I thought was actually the best part of the entire segment of the show, which then brings me to a match that I had very high hopes for and absolutely delivered. Now, there were moments early on in Cody Rhodes versus Kevin Owens that I thought, are we going to hit? Are we going to hit on this the way that I expect these two guys to hit on it? Because in fairness, Cody Rhodes put together one of the best ladder matches I can ever remember seeing when he was wrapping up with AEW, when he was wrestling without a contract. Cody Rhodes took on Sammy Guevara, and you had the moment, the Cody cutter from one ladder to the other, like an incredible match. Cody has put together great ladder matches in the past. Kevin Owens has had some as well. There were clips going around about Kevin Owens doing the package pile driver on El Generico back in the Ring of Honor days. Like, these guys know how to structure and put together a ladder match. And this one was brutal. I mean, this one hurt. There were multiple bumps in this match where I genuinely had concern for the spines of the competitors. We're talking about the shots with the small ladder. There was the funny moment where Owens brings out the small step ladder, goes up to the top of it, acts like he's going to, do some kind of like a swanton bomb off the top, and then goes, ah. But like, great moments in this match. You had the breaking of the bottom rung off and swinging that. Wade Barrett said, that was all him, that he taught that technique. You had some big bumps in this match coming across ladders out at ringside, but really the one that absolutely floored everyone. I mean, there's one that happened within the ring that I was pretty sure might have actually killed Kevin Owens, coming off the top rope across the ladder that was kind of draped between one in the center and one on the ropes. And I thought that Kevin Owens might have either landed smack dab on his spine or that his head might have cracked it. And when you start to see the doctors run in WWE, it feels more legit to me. Like in AEW, we're used to seeing Dr. Mike Sampson. Like he's usually in and around the area, so it's not jarring when he's there. But the way that the refs and the way that the ring crew and the doctors responded, oh shit, like something might have actually gone wrong here. And I thought for a second they were going to stop the match. Like that's how well they sold the moment. Oh, but then it got worse. It got more painful. So there's the wild bump going across that ladder, and I'm convinced that the doctors are going to stop the match. Sami Zayn shows up, and as I said, like the interesting thing with Sami is he has that idea thrown out to him about main eventing WrestleMania. So you have all this, and then it becomes, is Sami Zayn going to betray Cody Rhodes, who he's been aligned with and fellow good guy, or is he going to back his best friend, Kevin Owens? And is he going to, essentially, it depends on your viewpoint, is he going to turn heel? Is he going to become this bad guy along with Kevin Owens? Now, if you're like me, and you assess the situation objectively, Kevin Owens isn't really the heel. Kevin Owens is right, and he's been right the entire time. And I think that long-term, we are going to get an acknowledgement that Kevin Owens was right the entire time. But Sami doesn't help Kevin. Sami doesn't help Cody Rhodes. He's just there. He's just there so he doesn't get fined. He's just there for combat. He's there for competition. He's there to support his friends. And ultimately, Sami maybe makes the biggest mistake by not saving Kevin Owens' life because, the way this match ends. The way this match ends is something that will go down, maybe not quite as graphically in the minds of wrestling fans as Mankind getting thrown off the top of the Hell in the Cell through the announce table. But that shot at the end, Cody Rhodes with the Alabama Slam on Kevin Owens, putting him through a ladder, bending that ladder. Owens' head is like stuck in between rungs on this broken ladder. And then Cody goes up and he wins. That moment was frightening. The blood, frightening. The panic on Sami Zayn's face, frightening. All of the people surrounding the ladder to try to either pry Owens out of it or try to stabilize his neck, frightening. And again, regardless of how much you suspend your disbelief in the moment in a wrestling match, right? No matter how you do it, you have to watch that and go, there's no way to fall safely on that Alabama Slam where that ladder broke and reduce the risk entirely of those rungs coming down and potentially sandwiching your cabeza. That to me was an absolutely frightening bump. And it was executed to perfection. And the way that Owens just stayed there, collapsed, and kind of accordion slammed together, it was incredible. But then that led us to something that I've been waiting for, which is the quasi-Cody heel turn. Now, we're not there yet. There's no guarantee that we're ever going to get to the heel turn. But Cody doesn't just celebrate. He comes back. He kind of stalks the Kevin Owens area a few times. And then he goes out to the entrance ramp, and you think, all right, maybe he shouldn't have gone around Owens one more time or yelled at Owens. And there were a couple of times where he yelled down at Owens and Sammy. But no, he comes back and he gets up on the announce table and he strikes this pose on the announce table right behind Owens and Sami Zayn. And there has to be at least a part of you that goes, yo, that's not our beautiful, loving golden boy hero. That's kind of a dick move. It's kind of not a right thing to do if you're Cody Rhodes. And so what happens? Cody Rhodes in the background of this Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn shot. And all I kept thinking to myself is, ooh, we're starting to plant the seeds of the eventual Homelander heel turn, where Cody's just going to continue to do things that go just a couple steps more. Because within this match, there is a moment where he really starts to lay it in on Kevin Owens. And he snaps. And he says, this is what you wanted? I mean, there are moments in the fantastic. An incredible match. Kevin Owens absolutely broken as a human being after this one. Sami Zayn super concerned about his friend. Cody Rhodes celebrating in the background, almost mocking Kevin Owens and his bloodied corpse. Woof. It was a great match. I would almost argue that it was, in fact, cinema. Now, that main event. The main event's where we have to go next. We have to. Because the Royal Rumble, the men's Royal Rumble match, lived up to the hype in every way. Except for one, which we will get to in a little bit. But the men's Royal Rumble played out, for the most part, how I thought it would. And you can go back to last week's episode and you can check it out and you can see that I'm, for the most part, I laid out a very clear line of how I thought the match would end, how I wanted to see the match end, what I ultimately thought would happen, which was the betrayal of Roman Reigns by Paul Heyman to help CM Punk, and we were going to get the payoff of what was the promise, what was the favor that Paul Heyman owed to CM Punk. We did not get that. We did not get clarity on that. We still don't know what the issue is. But we started this match with Rey Mysterio and Penta. Now, did Penta's feet touch the ground the second time they went up over the ropes? Oh, methinks yes. Did the WWE show a replay? They sure didn't. Did they show other replays almost instantaneously in this match? Yes, they did. Were they very much trying to cover up the fact that Penta got booed for? Yes, they were. But that's okay. Penta had a nice showing. Now, there were moments in this match where Penta's down and not actively involved, but there were some really cool moments in it for Penta, who puts together an awesome first Royal Rumble showing. But Rey Mysterio and Penta together, it was beautiful to start. Chad Gable gets in there. You get some of that chemistry. Carmelo Hayes and Santos Escobar, they come in next. Otis is in there. It really starts to flip on its head when Braun Breaker gets in there, because there is a star power and an explosiveness to Braun Breaker that you just can't teach. And there is so very clearly a main event guy long-term in Braun Breaker. He gets in that match, and he starts unleashing hell. And then Tozawa comes out at number 8, but he gets attacked, and ISHO Speed has to come out in his place. Triple H says, hey, you got to go. Speed, you're going out. So ISHO Speed comes out. And in what was probably the most unbelievable but totally real bump in the history of the Royal Rumble, Braun Breaker breaks ISHO Speed in half. The impact that ISHO Speed felt in that moment is next level. It is so jarring. And to watch his head his neck snap the way that it did, whiplash as Braun Breaker pinned him down into the mat. And by the way, looked like his shoulder eventually slid up like onto Speed's face as they made contact with the mat. Yo, kudos to IShowSpeed, because that was brutal. And kudos to Breaker, because if anybody ever says pro wrestling's fake, good luck teaching that Impact. Good luck teaching how to get hit by that dude and slammed into the mat and it not hurt. Newsflash, that shit hurts. That's very real. Eventually, Speed gets thrown out of the ring. Otis catches him. Otis throws him up over his head, over the announce table. And then eventually, after the match, you go on social media and you can see that Speed's like missing a chunk of his like lower calf. Brutal. Good showing by him, though. Yo. Absolutely fine celebrity appearance. That worked out just well. Like, just fine. Well done. Sheamus enters the match. It felt like things started to kind of slow down. Jimmy Uso gets in the match. It's okay. I think at this point I've kind of established how I feel about the Usos. Jimmy's fine. Andrade comes in. I love Andrade. Big Andrade guy here. And when Andrade went to AEW, I thought the sky was the limit. And I very much thought Andrade would have like multiple title reigns, even like whether it was secondary title or not. That's where I thought he was going to go, and then maybe get into the main event picture. It never happened. Andrade kind of feels like another guy in WWE right now. It doesn't feel to me like he's being elevated to where I would want to see him, which is also a little bit concerning because I'm a very big Malachi Black, Aleister Black fan, and knowing that he's going to go there soon, I don't want to see the same thing happen to him. It doesn't mean that I think they're incapable in the WWE of figuring out a way to book Andrade or eventually a returning Aleister Black well. It's just a little concern that I have. I think that Andrade felt like a bigger deal, especially later in his run in AEW, specifically around when Punk put together or presumably had some input in the roster that was on Collision. That's when I thought Andrade was at his very best. He was fine in this match. Number 12 was the big one. Jacob Fatu comes in, and he starts raining down chaos, raining down violence. Jacob Fatu once again had a star performance. At this point, if you have not yet gotten on the Jacob Fatu train, I got news for you. There's a little bit of room left, maybe in the caboose, but this dude is an absolute stud. This guy is a main event talent. Jacob Fatu, make no mistake about it, will headline multiple WrestleManias in his career. This guy is an absolute star. And the best part about Jacob Fatu is that each and every time he was lined up across the ring from anyone, he felt like he belonged. At no point did Jacob Fatu stare down another superstar, get in a frame with another superstar, and not look like he belonged. We're going to get there in a second because there was a very important face-off that he had, and I think it established. Ludwig Kaiser gets in the match, gets eliminated almost immediately. The Miz gets in the match. He was fine. Joe Hendry, the lone representative of TNA in this match. Admittedly, I thought we would see a few TNA stars, including the Hardys. I really thought we were going to see at least one of the Hardys. Would have gotten a huge pop, would have been safe to have in that match, a lot of name recognition. Would have also helped out that partnership, would have certainly let people know that the Hardys are still active in pro wrestling, on Impact. Didn't happen. But Joe Hendry had like a good performance. Ultimately, Hendry gets eliminated by Roman Reigns, which in the moment people seemed to feel online was not a squash, but was just kind of like, did Joe Hendry really get much in? Did he feel like he was minimalized? When you get eliminated by Roman Reigns of all people, you're doing just fine. Speaking of Roman Reigns, he was the 16th entrant into the Royal Rumble, took the place of Joe Hendry, came in after Joe Hendry, eliminates Joe Hendry from the match. Drew McIntyre gets in. You get the showdown, the face-off between Reigns and McIntyre says, this started with you, this is going to end with you. Also mentions his family. You get that face-off, and you're like, yo, we have good storytelling here. If they ever wanted to go the Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns thing, they absolutely could. No doubt about it, that could be a main event of just about any pay-per-view. Will it main event WrestleMania? No. Will it main event something else? Entirely possible. Finn Balor comes into the match with a new theme, an FXXX, and nobody seemed to understand or know in the moment who was coming out, which is honestly just a problem across the board. Like, we need to go back to the days when wrestling entrance themes were unique, when you would hear a small tagline in the very beginning that would indicate who was coming to the ring. Right now, so many of the talents, it feels like their music is just a slight variation, a slight riff on a general, I don't know, like ringtone. And it makes things, it gets exacerbated in the Royal Rumble because you just keep hearing generic theme after generic theme, and you almost have to look at the board first to figure out who's coming out. You should have the audio cue of knowing who's coming out. Not saying it needs to be the glass shattering, not saying it needs to be If You Smell, not saying it needs to be the dong of The Undertaker or the first couple of notes of Kane's entrance, but like in the Attitude Era, we knew who was coming out within 2-3 seconds of the entrance playing. That is certainly not the case now. Finn Balor comes out to a minimal pop relative to what his star power is, I think in large part due to that. Shinsuke Nakamura comes in. I have long liked Shinsuke. I did not enjoy Shinsuke's performance in this match. I felt like it was plotting. Didn't do it for me. At number 20, Jey Uso comes into the match. I've been very clear about where I'm at on the Usos. Jey Uso has done a marvelous job of getting Yeet over. The crowd goes absolutely apeshit every time he comes out to the ring. There's no debating it. There's no doubting it. He is easily one of the most popular superstars in WWE. But just because he seems to be everybody else's cup of tea doesn't mean he needs to be mine. Now, just because I'm critical of it also doesn't mean that I'm right. But I watched Jey Uso in the ring, and I go, I watched Jey Uso and Jimmy Uso in a WrestleMania match that I was in attendance for. That was my pee break on night one of WrestleMania last year. I haven't actually gone back and watched the entire match yet. I've watched parts of it. I've watched them spam super kick after super kick. I don't get it. I understand the aura because he has it. I understand the catchphrase. Get it. I understand the merch. Get it. I understand the likability. Get it. But the in-ring part of it doesn't do it for me. And to me, it still feels like a tag team wrestler. Nobody can change my mind. Perhaps at some point he's going to put on an absolute classic of a match, and I'll get to come on this show and say, you know what, I was wrong. Jey Uso had it in him the whole time. I just didn't know. But as of right now, So Jey Uso comes in the match, totally fine. AJ Styles has to follow him. It's going to be a hard way to follow that entrance, but he gets a big pop. Returning AJ Styles. People love AJ Styles. That's fine. Braun Strowman comes into this match, and after Jacob Fatu has these long stretches of just looking incredibly dominant, including a face-off with Roman Reigns, which is really where, to me, you got the 100% confirmation that Jacob Fatu belongs in main events and that kind of top-of-the-card feud. Those two face-to-face didn't look weird. Eventually, Strowman comes out. Strowman is able to eliminate Jacob Fatu, who rips the announce desk apart, freaks the F out, like it becomes a whole big thing. John Cena enters the match at number 23. And at that point, I go to myself, ooh. Like, at that point, I knew, well, we still have to get Punk. We still have to get Seth Rollins. LA Knight was going to be in there. Sami Zayn was going to be in there. Figured Logan Paul would be in there. So I was like, wow, if Cena's coming out at 23, does that mean we have a big surprise coming? Who the hell is that going to be? We'll get there in a second. But Cena comes out, does his Cena thing. CM Punk comes out. Now you have Punk and McIntyre and Roman in the ring together. Very interesting. As they are facing off, the three of them, Seth Rollins' music hits. Now you get Rollins in there. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Cena, Punk, Roman, Rollins. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Now you feel like, oh, shit's going to hit the fan in a big way. Oh, and by the way, McIntyre still is. You're like, all right, that's a lot going on. Dom Mysterio comes out. Sami Zayn comes out. Damian Priest gets in there. LA Knight gets in there. And then at number 30, you get Logan Paul. Now, in the midst of all of this, all I keep thinking to myself is like, there were no really big surprises in this match, which I thought was a little bit disappointing, especially because in the Women's Rumble, I didn't feel like there weren't really many surprises there either. Then I'm like, did you miss an opportunity? Well, no, because the storytelling within the match And the way that they've set things up is huge. And a lot of it really does kind of focus in on Roman. You have Roman and McIntyre, Roman and Fatu. You have Roman and Punk, Roman and Rollins. You, in theory, could have Roman and John Cena. Like, all of that works out. Now, where things get really hectic in this match is when Rollins and Roman are just gunning for each other. And eventually, Punk dumps them both over the top rope, at which point Roman is irate. You get a CM Punk Roman kind of interaction, and then Logan Paul dumps CM Punk out of the ring. And you go, oh no. And then Seth Rollins snaps, hits the curb stomp on Roman on the floor, gets into a scrum with Punk. Then eventually, Rollins comes back around, gives a stomp to Roman on the stairs, gets back into it with Punk. So that very much looks like we are setting up a potential triple threat down the road with no title on the line, which nobody saw coming. In the midst of all the chaos, there's another moment that stands out because apparently this did not go over well if you are to believe reports coming out of the Royal Rumble. But there's a moment in this match where Logan Paul is kind of mugging for the hard cam. LA Knight is set up behind him like he's getting ready to get into it with him. And in the background, you get Damian Priest along with another superstar eliminating Drew McIntyre. It was Jey Uso eliminating Drew McIntyre from the match. But there's this weird thing where they kind of bump into LA Knight, Logan Paul, and it just seems like something went awry. And so this, what would have been or should have been a pretty dramatic elimination of McIntyre, kind of goes over like a fart in church. Like it was just like, oh, instead of like, whoa, you're like, Those were like the two biggest moments in the match. Now, you finally get down to the final three. And you have Jey Uso, you have Logan Paul, and you have John Cena. Paul gets eliminated. Fine. You then are left with Jey Uso and John Cena. Now, again, my kids just getting into wrestling. They know who John Cena is, okay? They at least know the John Cena theme song. And so they're like, all right, we want John Cena to win. I'm like, all right, guys, like, that's fine. You can want John Cena to win. Start going back and forth. Then they start doing the wrestling fan thing where it's like, oh, he's going to lose. Oh, yeah, he's got this. Oh, no, he's going to lose. And ultimately, you get both superstars on the apron. You get John Cena getting ready to give the AA to Jey Uso, which would then presumably dump him on the apron and then onto the floor. Uso gets off of his shoulders, comes back from the middle of the ring, shoves John Cena. Cena lands on the floor. Everybody's shocked. Jey Uso wins. The crowd goes wild. Now, in the arena, it felt like everybody was hunky-dory with Jey Uso winning. But online, people had an absolute conniption. Now, was it fair for people to get upset with the end of this match? Yes and no. It was a really strong Royal Rumble match. I think you would have a very hard time convincing a wrestling fan that this wasn't a good match. Cena at the end raises Uso's hand. And I don't think they needed to go this far. Like, I don't think they were at the risk of having Uso come off as like a heel or anything for eliminating Cena in his last Royal Rumble. But nice of Cena to go out and like essentially try to make sure like this is okay. And then he got out of the ring. The thing with the Jey Uso of it all is after the match, he essentially says that he's going to take on Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. And that's fine. That's like in the grand scheme of things, it's okay. It doesn't move the needle for me, but it's okay. But it's not a main event match. And I know that he's called main event Jey Uso. But to me, he's not a main event guy. Now, at least he's not a main event of WrestleMania guy. I've already gotten to see Gunther versus Jey Uso. I wasn't impressed the first time, and I'm not going to be impressed this time unless something really changes. Now, could there be a grander plan at work? Could we get to something I wanted to see? I honestly thought we were going to get The Rock showing up at number 31. I truly thought in my heart of hearts we were going to get The Rock at number 31. I was convinced. And then it didn't happen. I thought to myself, what if this whole thing is a big swerve? We saw Gunther versus Jey Uso, and Gunther won recently. What if right before Jey Uso thinks he's going to get to go into WrestleMania, and take on Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. What if The Rock were to come out and tell Jey Uso, no, I'm the High Chief. That title shot goes to me. It would get nuclear heat with wrestling fans, especially given how behind Jey Uso the fans are. Can you imagine if The Rock were to come out and take that match away? To quote JR, by God.